I would like to call to order the Solid Waste Management Authority, the City of Crescent City and the County of Del Norte, State of California, meeting in its regular session. Of those items that indicate a specific time will be heard at the assigned time. We may take items out of sequence, which we will do today. All documents referred to in the agenda are available at the office of the Solid Waste Authority, which is located 1700 State Street, Crescent City, between normal business hours 8 to 5 p.m. I am Roger Gitlin. I am the Vice Chair, and I call the meeting to order. If necessary, this board will meet in closed session at the end of this meeting. So at this time, before we move on to consent or any other items, I will ask in the audience if the public at this time wishes to address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter that is not on the agenda. Virginia, was your hand up? Did you wish to come up? Not on the agenda, right. So if it's not on this agenda, have you seen this agenda? Okay. Okay, let me read that. And on any matter on or off the agenda. So the option is yours if you would like to come up and speak. State your name and your city.
Yes.
And
I'm Elizabeth Henry, and I live in the county, and I have been here many times since May of last year. But first of all, I want to thank you very much for hiring the consulting firm, R3. It still feels kind of strange to be saying thank you for that, because I was very opposed to the push to hire someone, a consultant to fix something that many of us in the community thought wasn't broken. But as things went and nothing was moving ahead, it seemed like nothing was going to happen without some outside objective help. So I'm very glad that that's happening. Now that you have R3 on board doing their job, I hope you will support, I know that's on the agenda, support the idea of having a public meeting as soon as possible. I think it's really important to hear from the public. Those are the customers for solid waste removal and recycling. And I think they have some things to say about what's going on in this county. So anyway, again, thank you for taking this action, and I hope to see you at a public meeting very soon. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other public comments at this time? Any other public comments? All right. Come on up, Vicki. And clerk, we did not take roll. I guess that's not our option. Is that necessary to do that legally?
I've done a silent roll call.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Go ahead. Identify yourself, Vicki.
Yeah. We don't do the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning? It'd be kind of nice.
I'm new on the boat, and I'm used to doing that. And of course, so at this time, everybody, would you please rise? We'll do the pledge. Thank you for that reminder, Vicki.
Oh, it's
And go ahead,
wonderful.
please.
I wrote out 53 pages to cover in 3 minutes, but I have the flu, so please excuse me. I'm going to cover just 3 or 4 highlights.
And I need you to speak right into that microphone because you're being on tape when I hear all your words.
I hope you can hear it. I grew up in a time when we took trash to the dump, not solid waste to the transfer station. So please excuse me if I'm from the horse and buggy days. We have state law, we have city ordinances, we have county ordinances, and now we have solid waste ordinances. In every jurisdiction in this county, we are subject to either city and state, county and state, and now these solid waste authority ordinances. So you have 2 or 3, however you want to look at it, ordinances that you're under. Sometimes they disagree with one another. At best, they're duplicative. I am requesting that you repeal or revoke all 4 solid waste authority ordinances which were adopted in 2008, being number 1, number 2, number 3, and 2009, number 1. They haven't been used. They've been there since 2008. This is 2014. We've gotten along for 6 years with a lot of words on paper. The more words you have written down, the more confusion there is. I know that the city was contacted and the county was contacted, and they were requested to bring their little ordinances up to date so that we as a task force, or I should say the task force because I'm not on it, but I attend as many meetings as I can, so that the task force could make ordinances that would complement, fill in the gaps, etc. Well, the city and the county put those things so far on the back burner that I don't think that they're even on the list anymore. So if those 4 were repealed, the worst thing that would happen is you would start all over from scratch. You would also be able to tell the county and the city, deal with this. If you want certain things in your city, fine. I don't live in the city. I can't vote on those people. I know you're talking about privatization. Privatization...
You should kind of wrap up your point.
I am right now.
A little longer.
Yep. Privatization may not be the way to handle garbage, but certainly over-regulation, which is causing confusion, is not it.
Okay, again, just to address that, that is on our agenda. We do have a new board member, which I'd like to introduce at this time, City Councilman Gastineau. Welcome to our authority. I think we are expecting all members will get copies, all authority board members, commissioners will get copies of the ordinances. Ted, is that what your plan is?
Yes, they're available online at on the Solid Waste Authority's website, and I apologize they did not bring written copies for the board members, but I'll make sure they get those. Okay,
so all board members will have hard copies of the authority ordinances in question, and I think we had indicated to you, Ted, 2008, 01, 02, 03, and 04, and 2009, we should include that to get everybody up to date. Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, I just had a question on, just a point of clarification more than anything else. I don't think I was actually surprised it's not on, because that was the request of the Solid Waste Task Force, is that be put on this meeting's agenda to address the ordinances, one of them, or it's not agendized at all to deal with the ordinances today. I don't know if that's the plan.
All right, here is, and Commissioner Holly and I met with Ted, and here's the reason we delayed it till February. Because we have a new member who we want to bring up to speed, we felt it was unfair to put Commissioner Gastineau in a situation of having to overwhelm him with all of this paperwork at this time. It will be on for February, okay, and everyone will have that opportunity. So you're right. We're about 30 days behind schedule, but it is planning. We will have this our discussion. Now, are there any other comments from the board at this point regarding the ordinances, because it's been brought up in question? Are there any other public comments at this time? Having seen that, I will, no. Well, Vicki, we already recognized you, so you had your 3 minutes, so I'll have, well, let me put it to you at this point. We're good for what we have, so your 3 minutes were exhausted. I want to be fair to everybody. Are there any other comments from public members in the audience at this time? Okay, so let's move on from there. And I think I'd like to take out of order, let's pick up General Solid Waste Authority Matters 6.1. Let us be the first, that'll be the first issue of today. Discussion and possible action regarding elections.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Roger Gitlin as the chair of the Solid Waste Management Authority. Since we are in rotation, it's county's turn to be chair now.
I'll second.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for the chair? Okay, we'll close that and we'll take a vote. Okay, so let's call for the vote.
Commissioner Holly?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Brown?
Wilson.
Sorry. You know what? It's because we go back so far.
No.
Commissioner
Yes.
Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
And Vice Chairman Gitlin?
That would be yes. Okay, this is going to be fun here. All right, now I'll open up nominations for, It's okay. It's when it comes to the spelling, and it really gets funny. I'm my own country. Maybe Gitland. Is that Gitland? I know we're on television, so. Let's open up the nominations for vice chair, which will be a city person. And I'll go to the authority commissioner members to nominate for vice chair.
I nominate Commissioner Hawley for vice chair.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, here's any other, and we will close those nominations. Are there any other nominations? No, at this point, that would be, we're set here. So let's take the vote on that. For vice chair?
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes?
Commissioner Gastineau,
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley,
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan,
Well, that wasn't a really loud yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin,
Yes, I am voting yes on this, yes. Okay, now, we have, I'll open nominations for secretary. At this time, do we have who is our secretary, by the way? Sitting secretary. Okay, I'll open nominations.
I would nominate Commissioner Wilson to be secretary.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay,
Just,
Okay.
just a little bit of discussion.
and let's discuss.
I just want to make sure that procedurally it's okay for the public member to hold an office. I don't know if there's any rules regarding that.
I'm not aware of any restrictions.
Okay, that's all. I just wanted to make sure before we went forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and nominations will close, and let's call for the vote on that.
Commissioner Sullivan,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes?
Commissioner Gastineau,
Yes.
Mr. Hawley,
Yes.
and Vice Chairman Gitlin.
Yes. Okay, and the last position, the clerk, the secretary clerk, and the treasurer controller.
The treasurer controller is currently Rich Taylor, who is not here, and this is actually a position that's paid, and it is required that it be a certified public accountant. And I did confer with him, and he is willing to continue should the board appoint him.
Now, do we, Ted, will we need to, required to nominate him again?
It's a non-voting officer, but it is elected by the authority board, so yes, it's time to appoint him.
Okay, we'll open up nominations for the treasurer controller.
I'd move that Richard Taylor, again, function as our treasurer controller.
Second? Do I have a second?
Second.
And second it is, okay. We'll close the nominations and we'll call for the vote.
Excuse me, Commissioner Hawley,
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau,
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan,
I will abstain due to a conflict of interest on Mr. Taylor.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes?
and Vice Chairman Gitlin.
And that would be yes, so we'll show the record. It passes 4-0 with one abstention. All right, so let's go back into the regular agenda. We'll go to the consent agenda. Items 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And it is seconded. And do we have any discussion on this? I think at this point, any commissioners have any discussion? Just protocol, Ted, do we need to have the public involved in the consent agenda discussion?
Not unless, yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
so we'll close that, and we'll ask for public input on consent agenda items open. If any member of the public wishes to address at the dais at this time, please approach. Seeing none, we'll close that, and we'll call for the vote.
Sorry, I'm busy typing. Commissioner Sullivan,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes?
Commissioner Hawley,
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Gitlin.
And I would yes. Okay. Okay, the directors and treasurers report.
Just a correction on that, Karen, too. I think it's chair, because positions all changed over. Yeah.
Boy, this is going to be fun. Okay. All right. The director and treasurer's report. Ted, you're up first. Agenda items 2.1, acting director's report.
Okay, so Major activities since our last meeting. I did facilitate the start of the contract with R3, who's here today, and we'll talk more about that. We coordinated with Amy Cox of Del Norte County to do a health screening for all the authority employees that were eligible, as well as a catch-up for the county employees who may have missed the previous health screening. Wrote and recorded new radio promotions emphasizing that we are taking holiday trees through the end of the month for no charge, and that's a cooperative program with support from Hambro, WSG, and Recology. For Recology customers, you can get your holiday tree collected at your curb by calling and making arrangements with them, and their number is 464-4181. I've been coordinating with Rick Lockstead of the county engineering department, who helped supervise the drilling, development, and purging of 2 investigation wells at the landfill, and I have a PowerPoint for you today that will actually work. And I did complete the online ethics training module as we're required to do, and again, that's also on the agenda later, and we'll talk about that. I've been working with Treasurer Taylor, Administrative Assistant Isabel Valdez, and County Auditor Clinton Shad to finalize a list of bad debts written off at the end of the fiscal year 13-14, and we are planning on presenting this to the Authority Board at the February meeting. I've also been working with Rich Taylor and Clinton Shad to develop a new written amortization or payment schedule that we can all agree acknowledges all payments made to date on the iBank loan for the transfer station and lease agreements, and that schedule needs to adjust the principal and interest amounts due accordingly to the payments that we've already made. So this dovetails to that $198,000 that we discussed earlier that was essentially like the last month's rent equivalent one might have in a lease agreement. Regarding compliance, I've been working to prepare our semi-annual monitoring report to the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and this is also the month that we collect groundwater, surface water, and stormwater samples out at the landfill, and these activities will take a significant fraction of my time this month. Glad to have the rain back. Hopefully that will allow us to sample for stormwater.
Ted, can I interrupt you right
yes.
there? And I know you wrote in here that said that staff prepare this report. Is that anybody else than you, or does anyone help prepare that report or collect those samples?
Like I said, I do work with the county to collect samples whenever that's a possibility, but it isn't always possible. But the short answer is it's primarily my responsibility.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And I'm very excited to announce that probably later this month, and we'll do a more focused promotion on it once we get everything up and running, but we are going to start recycling all architectural coatings. So we've been taking latex paint, non-aerosol latex paint from households for no charge since the transfer station's been open. And there's a new product stewardship program that's rolling out through a product stewardship organization called Paint Care. And essentially, when you're buying new paint, you're paying into this program so that we will be able to, hopefully later this month, start accepting all oil-based paints, water protective applications, stains. We will taking lacquers, but we won't be taking thinners. But it's a dramatic expansion on our daily household hazardous waste that we'll be receiving, and it is an excellent example of the successful rollout of product stewardship programs, largely fostered by our relationship with the California Product Stewardship Council, who's been active at a statewide level for that. We're going to be doing training later this month. The dates have shifted slightly, but our intent is to do training with our staff and our operations so we can work out any bugs there might be before we start doing a grand promotion to the larger community to let them know, bring us all your oil-based paints.
Ted, a quick question for you on this. It's not an item I see, and obviously it's not something people paint with, but cooking oil?
Cooking oil, we take cooking oil, fats, and greases every day.
Okay.
For no charge.
Okay. So people just bring it in a container, or how is that?
Yeah, our experience is that we usually see this shortly after Thanksgiving and Christmas. Some people like to deep fry their turkeys.
Sure.
And so that's a time when we see a lot of cooking oil and fats, and they can bring it in. We have a container at the transfer station. And
the restaurants are able to do this too?
We are focusing primarily on households because we have limited storage capacity, and most restaurants will have grease traps that they regularly will get pumped out as part of their operations. Okay?
Sorry.
Any other board comments, or you're continuing your report?
Yeah, just a quick rundown on some of the activities I'm planning before next month. Of course, working with R3, but also something I discussed with Commissioner Gitlin, and apparently most of you are already aware that the county and the city are distributing their agendas using iPads. And so I'd like to explore this as a possibility, as a significant fraction of our time does go into preparing and distributing the agendas. And so I plan on the coming month getting an iPad, working with the county to see exactly how that might work. And then assuming that we can work it out in terms of budget and operations, then I think I would probably be getting 1, maybe 2 additional iPads plus that one, because Commissioner Wilson, our public member, should have one. And I think I should be able to use the ones that the city and the county individually issues to the city representatives and the county representatives. And then there's the question about whether or not I would have to get one to work with our legal counsel. But
How many are we talking about, Ted?
I think probably not more than 3, but I will examine all of these issues and come back at the next meeting to let you know what my recommendation is.
Will the board the authority need to be prepared to allocate the funds to do this on the February agenda?
Possibly, and if a budget transfer is required, then I would also incorporate that. But I plan on investigating this and giving you a better report next month.
Okay.
You know, Ted, in thinking about this, we may want to also do some kind of a technology policy or something so that we know how those iPads are to be used. The city just drafted one before we had ours distributed, and it's kind of good. Just reminds us that they're used for authority business and
Excellent reminder.
can't do
I'll get in
things that-
contact with the city to find out about that policy. Thank you for that suggestion.
How is that working, the iPads? I personally like paper, but how is that working? I mean, has everybody made the decision that that's what they want here?
I mean, I've had some pretty good success, although I still, for the board meetings, will use it just because, you know, if I'm not the chair, I probably would use the iPad solely.
Yeah.
I find it to be an excellent tool, and it gives you the opportunity to access something immediately, and it's not cumbersome. Obviously, paperwork is cumbersome, it's costly, so, you know, reluctantly, we're all getting yanked into the 21st century. This is the way to go, so I say let's move it forward, and if those of you who are, like myself, a little reticent to get involved with technology, then just jump in the water and start moving your arms around. So we'll expect to see something on the February agenda on that.
Yeah, I just like to say that the city, I think, has had a really good experience, and Mr. Gastineau is actually very, very adept at iPads. He pretty much what he does for a living. So if there
Well,
are
I think he
questions-
wanted a Samsung, though, I think is what.
Yeah, I think so too. I will say too that although our agendas aren't nearly as long as the school districts, but it saved the school district over $20,000 a year when we went to technology and stopped making all those copies. So even if it's a fraction of that, it'd be worthwhile. So I appreciate your movement in this area.
There may be additional permit changes and perhaps even a small building permit for establishing the paint care program at the transfer station. Some of this has to do with how we want to store the paint totes when they're full. Working with the county engineering staff to collect the water quality samples, as I discussed. I believe that we'll be able to have as part of that sampling, we will sample our new investigation wells. So I'm very excited about that, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the data comes out like. We are still on schedule to conduct additional investigations regarding possibly getting landfill liability insurance. And I am to conduct an analysis of the small volume transfer stations in Gasky and Klamath, as though that task was pulled from the R3 scope. And I still need to conduct inspections of the certified oil recycling centers. And then also in the director's report, you'll see copies of the brochure from Paint Care that describes the Paint Care program. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, that is your report, and again, just to reiterate about the ordinances, which I thought you were going to address in your report, that all members will have paper copies sooner rather than later, so we can all get up to date on this. So thank you on that, Ted.
I apologize for that omission, but like I said, they are available on the Solid Waste Authority's website if you want to access them immediately.
All right, so any other board questions or comments?
Yes, I needed to ask about the accounts receivable.
Mm-hmm.
We had, we're trying to figure out again how to compare the revenue that comes in to the transfer station and then the reports that we get from the county that are a month late. And this particular month, again, there was a $10,000 variation just because of the difference between the, we'll assume it's because of the difference between accrual, and we're having, it's just very difficult.
I did confirm that.
You did confirm?
Yes, that in fact, the reason for that difference is entirely that what the county is reporting is the cash, and what our reports are reporting is the accrual. And so for the month of November that we were looking at, we accrued an amount, and when you look at the November reports from the county, the amounts that are in the gate tipping fees and the authority service fees are both larger numbers than were reported in November. And the reason for that is that we received additional revenue from people who are paying off their accounts.
But yet the accounts receivable was exactly to the dollar the same.
And I
did not move, and so that's where, and so what was their, so the accounts receivable didn't go down.
Right, and I've looked at those records, and there are multiple months where that happens. And what seems to happen is there are 2 or 3 months where it stays the same and then it jumps. I'm investigating as to why that is.
It just makes it very, very difficult, the way the county is doing their books, for any of us here on the board to be able to be a good steward in looking over these figures and seeing if they're accurate or not. It's impossible, really, without also going through these numbers and then going over to the county's offices. There's 2 sets of books, and we are not really able to even do the job that we're tasked to do, because the way the county has their books are not on a cash system. It's hard to even track. I mean, that's our job here, is to follow this, so I don't like it. I don't know how we can fix it.
Well, let me just interject just for a second, because I do share your point of view. You know, I'm looking over these, I guess are we into 2.2 to 5 at this point?
Yes.
We're kind of overlapping into the subject matter. It's not user-friendly. You have to be almost a CPA to understand, and the fact that it's in 4-point font is not helpful either. Ted, can we make this statement of revenues and expenditures more user-friendly?
This has been an ongoing topic of discussion at these authority meetings, and the regular response is that these reports are generated by the county auditor's office. And I really appreciate Commissioner Wilson's focus on this issue, and as we've discussed, both the treasurer and I are working towards trying to create a system at the authority where we are running our set of books on an accrual basis, because that's the way that it makes the most sense to manage our entity. However, we need to work with the county because they are managing our books, and so we need to operate in a way that communicates with their modified cash system. And therefore, it seems most reasonable that we should develop an accounting system that can both report on an accrual basis and match the cash accounting basis that the county is using. And so this is a parallel system that we're working to develop using QuickBooks, and that process continues. We're not complete with it yet.
Well, I'll just say this, without using a magnifying glass to use this, I think we can at the very least increase the size of the font on this. Because to look at this, and if it goes into another page or two, it's very difficult. You have to have a ruler, and it's really difficult to follow how to read this. I'll entertain this from other...
And they're not accurate.
Yeah. Commissioner Gastineau.
Getting the electronic copy, you can magnify the accounts receivable as large as you want. So going digital is not a bad thing. A lot of good stuff in there. You can't make your eyes bigger, but you can make the page bigger on the iPad.
All right, are there any other comments regarding this? And as far as the accuracy is concerned, Commissioner Wilson, what's your suggestion? How would you like to, do you have a motion that you'd like to introduce to clarify this? Is there any
Well,
action
now
on
that
this?
our consultants are here, hopefully they'll be able to take a look at our systems that we have, and particularly I'm very, interested in their analysis of our bookkeeping system and the amount that we pay the county, approximately was $55,000 a year. I mean, that needs to work for us so that we have the responsibility of overseeing these books, and honestly, nobody would be able to do this without, with the information that we get from the Solid Waste Authority and then the county, that you just can't reconcile that, even though you might wait a month for county to, get theirs, up to date. So it's very difficult, and
But I also
I
thought there
don't
was a working group right now with the treasurer and the auditor and staff about coming up with cash controls because of the ongoing problem that we'd had and the reason there's $29,000 still missing. I thought there was a process right now that we're working on in terms of developing cash controls, and this would be one way to, so I would assume that, I would throw it back to Mr. Taylor and Mr. Shad in that.
well, and at some point though, I mean, honestly, this body is paying
Yeah.
quite a bit of money.
Well, now would be the time to do it. I mean, in terms of developing them, now would be the time to add that cash control if it's possible, so. on
Well,
that particular item.
tomorrow morning, I'm going to be meeting with the R3 people, 8 o'clock. I think we'll see you tomorrow. And this will be on our list to address, to see how we can make this more user-friendly to this authority. All right, now, moving on. So you're finished with your report, Ted. 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, and 2.5 are all under the umbrella of Mr. Taylor. Ted, will you be addressing those
I'd be happy
issues?
to answer any questions regarding them, but they
All
are
right, the
the
Treasurer
standard
Controller's
reports.
report for November 2013.
Well, we have the authority claims approved by the director and myself. We have the totals for December that are from our records, the AR aging summary. And then finally, we do have the authority revenue report, and at the time that this was published, the December numbers were not yet available. But generally, we're more or less on target in terms of our revenue projections.
So at the February meeting, you'll have figures through January or through December?
From the county, I will have figures through December, and then I will have the authority figures through January.
Okay. All right, and moving right along, any 2.4 monthly cash and charge reports, and lump them together and go right through it, Ted, if you wish.
I'd be happy to answer questions.
All right, so not having Mr. Taylor here today, who would be the person who would be asked that question, do any of the commissioners have any questions on numbers 2.2 to 2.5?
I just have one quick question on the aging summary, where we have the outstanding bills.
Yep.
Attain Specialty Insurance looks like they owe us a significant amount of money, and I'm not familiar with them. What kind of business is that? It's like seventh from the top.
Right.
It's $5,500.
That's credit though, isn't it?
It's a credit?
It's credit.
It's got a negative in front of it.
Well, good for Attain.
No.
That's okay.
All right.
All right, so are there any other commissioner comments on items 2.2 to 2.5? Seeing none, we'll close that off. And do we need to move into the public sector on comments on 2.2, 2.5, Ted? Not necessary?
Yes, public comments are welcome.
Okay, public comments on the director and treasurer's reports, 2.2 to 2.5. Anyone from the public wishes to approach the dais and speak, please identify yourself. Come on up. Okay, I don't see any. So we'll close that off and we'll move on to discussion action items. And we'll go to 3.1. This is the landfill closure. Information regarding road improvements and drilling of two investigative, try that again, information and regarding road improvements and drilling of two investigative wells at the Crescent City landfill. And Ted, you have a PowerPoint on that? Okay.
Hello, hello. Not answering that one. Where are we? Slideshow, where are we? Normal? I'm looking for the slideshow. Slides, show, ruler, guidelines, zoom, fifth window, slideshow. There you go, from current slide. There we go. They're over there. Okay, so I'll review this for Mr. Gastineau's benefit. What has happened here is the landfill, we have to monitor water quality. This monitoring is guided and overseen by the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, and Gina Morrison is our point of contact. And the landfill historically has had a threat and complexity rating. These ratings go way back and predate the time of our budget challenges here in California, when the state essentially cut off a source of revenue that was going to the regional water quality control boards, and the regional water quality control boards upped their permit fees to try to fill the holes in their budgets. And so those permit fees are associated with these threat and complexity ratings. And so we have a permit fee associated with our waste discharge requirements permit, 9790, and the Crescent City landfill has been given a 1A threat and complexity reading. In other words, in terms of the closed landfills in California, according to this rating system, the Crescent City landfill is among the most dangerous in the state. I disagree with this assessment. I also believe that if anybody was to go to the different closed landfills around the state, there's no way that this would be deemed as the most dangerous landfill in the state. However, we actually need to prove that point to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And so what we're doing is we're drilling 2 additional investigation wells to try to definitively show that the water direction of the groundwater is actually flowing away from the houses. And so it's very unlikely that, just like water going downstream, if you're dumping something that's nasty into the river, the people who are upstream from you are not threatened by that. The people who are downstream are quite threatened by it. And so if we can show that the landfill is generally downstream from the houses, then the houses are much less at risk in being close to the landfill. So that's what we're trying to show. Now, we hired a contractor, Fish Drilling and Bush Geotechnical, to look at the geomorphology of the drilling. But when they got out there, they discovered that it was a sand dune, and even though they had assured me they could go across sand, this sand was not something they could go across. And so they went back home and they said, build us a road. So we investigated what it would take, and we worked with the road department to build a road. And so that's what I'm showing you today, is what we did in terms of building the road prior to drilling the wells. So here's what the overall road looks like from the top of the landfill. You can see that it starts over here by the access road and swirls around and goes out to here where the well drilling site is. So there's, looking at it, you can see that the road department was able to find some low-grade crushed rock, certainly not up to most road standards, but perfectly fine for our purposes. There's, for a sense of scale, there's the authority work truck. There's looking at we were looking at the well E3 pair from about where the new wells will be drilled. Now you're looking at the stakes here indicating where the new wells did get drilled, and looking back down towards the landfill. Looking back at the truck, looking back towards the access road, and there's the drill rig that was actually on site doing the drilling. See, it's pretty tall, pretty heavy, and very top heavy. That's one of the reasons why we needed to do this road improvement, is that this is a 70,000-pound drill rig, but like I said, it's top heavy. So were one of the wheels to sink and it to tip over, we would have a very expensive process of getting it extracted. So that was part of the reason for doing the well drilling. Now you see that all the people on site, as they're doing the well drilling, you also have the geomorphologist who's looking at the underlying geology and grading that, because that's important for our reporting. There's the actual drilling process, and that upwelling that you see is actually mud that's used as part of the drilling operation. And here we are back to the start. So you can see where the road improvement is, you can see where the residential well locations are, and we're hoping to have data on that next month. So that's that report.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Board comments?
It also reduces the amount that we have to pay, so the permitting for the 1A was 63,000?
It was more than twice the amount for a 2A rating.
In the 2A rate, so then, which that's where they have us rated, so we submitted the amount for the 2A rating, even though we hadn't had the wells in yet. We were taking a little bit of time to do that, so we didn't get clearance. So Ted's been negotiating to get the rating changed, because then our permit fees go way down. So that's important for us.
Okay. Any other comments from authority members? Go ahead. Good. I have a question, Ted. What's the hierarchy on this 1A status, and 1A being worst? What is it, 2A, 3A, 4A, or is it double A?
There's the threat rating is the 1, 2, or 3, and the complexity rating is the A, B, or C.
So it's a negative hierarchy. So 1 would be
1A
worst.
is the worst of the worst, and 3C is not a problem, essentially. But the rating, like I said, it's a qualitative rating scale, so there is no mechanism by which one regional board compares their rating to another regional board. And we made a very detailed appeal of this, and the regional board is working with us as best within the constraints that they have. So,
Will we have an update on the reevaluation of this rating?
I hope to have that next month. We'll see whether, I'm not sure that we'll have the water quality data back by that time, so it's possible that we'll have a report
So we're
on
looking
in
to
March.
get above 1, which would be 2 or 3. And then we're trying to, change the number? What's the second?
The regional board has made it very clear they will not move us to 2B. We are working towards a 2A rating, and
Okay.
that seems to be about as much flexibility as they're willing to grant.
And then we're off, so to speak, we're off the button, and we're off out of the scrutiny.
Then we have a much lower regular permit fee, and I think, and the question that will remain is we're trying to drill these investigation wells primarily as piezometers, meaning that we're looking at the depth to the groundwater, because that's the most important information. If, however, these wells indicate that there might be some movement of groundwater towards the houses, it's quite possible that they become incorporated into our regular monitoring requirements. So there is an outside chance that this might actually increase our monitoring costs, but we will work, of course, to control that.
All right, I'll close authority comments and open to the public. Does the public, anybody wish to approach the speaker's dais and address on this issue of landfill closure and information regarding the landfill? Nope. Okay, so we'll close that and we'll move on to number 4, collections franchise, discussion possible action regarding deployment authority directed complimentary bin pulls for community cleanup. I believe I asked about that. Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, so you'll see a table on the last part of the report for item 4.1 that summarizes how the dumpsters were deployed. This is an asset of the authorities. Just like the authority negotiated as part of the collections agreement that the authority would receive franchise fees, similarly the authority negotiated prior to the award of the collections contract that part of the collections contract is there are 20 community complementary bin pulls. So the authority can say, we want to put a bin here, and it's going to be there for up to 2 weeks, and then you'll pull it, and you'll just and that will be a complimentary bin pull. The disposal charges are not covered by this, and so frequently, for events like, say, 4th of July, it's not uncommon to ask the authority waive their fees, and then there's an additional request forwarded frequently to Hambro Waste Solutions Group requesting that they waive their fees so that those essentially those dumpster services are free for those community events. However, it's important to recognize that this is part of Recology's contract, and it's an extra request for Hambro Waste Solutions Group every time. But that said, How did we use these bins last year? There were 3 bins used for the 4th of July celebrations organized by the Del Norte Chamber of Commerce. 5 bins were used at the Del Norte County Fair organized by the 41st Agricultural District. 6 bins were used for the coastal cleanup in September. 1 bin was used for Sea Cruise. 2 bins were used for a cleanup near Walmart as part of an Eagle Scout project. 2 bins were used for the cleanup behind Safeway organized by the City of Crescent City. And 1 bin was used for a cleanup along Union Street, organized by Commissioner Gitlin and others. So that's how they have been used in the past, and without further direction, that's probably mostly how they would be used again next year. But these are the board's discretion in terms of guidance, in terms of how we use them, and we do have a lot of flexibility. So one of the ways that this was discussed early on was that if there was a community group, say, that was having a lot of dumping in their neighborhood, or they just wanted to organize a neighborhood cleanup, it would be possible to designate that they get a bin. They have a limited period of time. They could fill that bin, but it would remove that authorities use later.
Ted?
Commissioners, any feedback? Is that your
Yeah.
your report?
That's it.
Commissioner Gastineau.
Yeah, I noticed that the fair uses 5 bins, and it doesn't matter the size of the bin pole, is that correct?
It can be, yes, we get the most bang for our buck, so to speak, when these are 40-yard bins.
Has there been any education to the fair to possibly like go with 2 larger bins instead of 5 to give more for the community?
I'd be happy to work with them on that. And if the board would care to provide me any direction on this, such as, can you get the fair to use fewer, or we'll offer the fair up to this amount, and we'll have 4th of July have this amount, that kind of guidance would be very useful to me. But
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that they probably have them around so they're convenient for their, people just to dump them off clear, but, if they only use 2 40-yard bins, that frees up another, 3 for the community, and it's just a little more work for them to get their garbage to a longer haul on the fairgrounds.
It's a good point. Any other commissioners want to have a...
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Just that I agree with Mr. Gastineau. It looks like half of these bins are really relatively small, right? I mean, they're 3 yards, 4 yards, 2 yards?
For the coastal cleanup, that's kind of a challenge, and I think it's a really good point. Of course, the coastal cleanup is something we want to support. And there's always the challenge about, you want to cover the whole coast, and so you want a bin that's not too far. But part of the way that we can reduce those number of bins is saying, all right, instead of the 5 that you're requesting, you can get 3. Where do you want them? But they're going to be larger bins, and then you're going to have to pick up the trash from one location, bring it to another, which makes more work on those volunteers, but it's a way of dealing with it. And this is, like I said, an authority asset that, used judiciously, can be spread throughout the year for much community benefit.
Well, I know that's exactly what we did with that last bin of the year, so we didn't squander it. That last bin of the year, I asked for Ecology for the largest bin, which was a 40 cubic yard bin, and then what we did with Our Daily Bread Ministries and their truck, they just moved around in a wide, like a 2-mile area, picking up trash and then putting it in there, and we ended up filling it up. But my concern has to do with, really, there's no bin activity for almost the first 6 months of the year. And then it's all the way, and basically they're all being used for events that are we really only have 5 bins a year. So I would submit to this authority that we should perhaps consider adding additional bins so that during this period, especially the first 6 months of the year, I think I stand on record as being one who wants to clean up our community faster and quicker. So I would like to see us consider adding additional bins.
Well, 20 is our number. Above that, we pay.
Okay, well, then maybe we pay, if that's the case. So I think this is the issue, since the fact that they're really not being utilized until July, mid-year, and then all but 5 are used for already predetermined successful events. Maybe this authority should consider adding additional bins, and again, it might be a cost, but maybe we should put a study on that. I'll open that up.
The cost is already set within the agreement, and we have, it's 187 It's not on this rate sheet because it's not a service that's available to the general public. But we do pay this rate for the removal of the bins in Gasky and Klamath. And I think it's $107.50 or so. It's about that.
It seems to me that if we can encourage people to use bins of a larger size and use fewer bins, that'll free up some for us to use. And secondly, I think that maybe the idea of additional bins is something we could consider in this year's budget cycle. You know, we have a lot of expenses that we have right now, and I don't know that we can do that between now and July.
Any other comments at this time? Okay, well then I'll close the discussion with the idea that essentially everybody is aware, with the schedule being what they are, the events already planned, we have 5 bins, and they can be maximum or they can be minimum, and if we operate on that thinking that there are essentially only 5 bins a year for Del Norte County, and then we can accept that or increase it at some point in the future, that's up to this authority to consider. So I'll close that subject, and unless anyone else has something else to contribute. Okay, and open it up. Anybody from the public wish to comment on this subject? Okay, we'll move on from that. Okay, let's move on to 5.1, I believe, is the transfer station. Ted, this is discussion possible action regarding updated policy for accepting residential fluorescent light bulbs
Right.
at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. And would this also include Gasky and Klamath in this?
No, it doesn't, but I'd be happy to address that.
Okay, go ahead.
So, under our operations agreement for the Del Norte County Transfer Station with Hambro WSG, when we first started that contract, we set up a policy so that the most common household hazardous waste were received for no charge at the transfer station. So these include used motor oil, used oil filters, antifreeze, car batteries, non-aerosol latex paint, household fluorescent tubes, and televisions. And the household fluorescent tubes, come 2006, all fluorescent tubes were banned from disposal. And there were already laws in place that affected businesses, but really the hammer came down in 2006. And so what has happened is that this service that was under, Hambro is contractually obligated to provide free to residents. We've created a system where they have a charge for their commercial fluorescent tubes that is such that we seem to have an issue with commercial businesses representing that there are fluorescent tubes coming from their house in large quantities, 20, 30 fluorescent tubes at a time. And so there's a need to establish some way to control this a little bit more. And so the recommendation is that the following policy be adopted and implemented at Del Norte County Transfer Station. That up to 9 fluorescent bulbs may be accepted from a Del Norte County residence at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. We used to have a program like this in Gasky and Klamath through trailers that were developed by Hambro at WSG, but essentially they became such a vandalism hazard. People would break into those bins and then break all of the fluorescent tubes, and it created more problems than it solved, which was really too bad. And so we had to pull those trailers, and that service is no longer available. But it is available at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. Another element of this policy is that for customers that bring in 9 or more residential fluorescent bulbs in a single trip, that customer's name will be recorded on the receipt for that transaction, and the customer will be informed that they will not be allowed to dispose of any additional free residential fluorescent bulbs for the next 30 days. So it's a way of saying, all right, we'll take your 9 today, but that's it for the month. Customers who bring in more than 9 fluorescent bulbs on a single trip will be advised that this is a commercial quantity of fluorescent bulbs, and such customers will be charged commercial rates for each bulb disposed unless they can convince the gate attendant that such bulbs come from residents. If the gate attendant believes that the fluorescent bulbs likely came from a residence, that customer will be allowed to dispose of up to 9 fluorescent bulbs on that day under the conditions described. All commercial fluorescent bulbs and tubes, as well as all residential fluorescent tubes and bulbs over 9 disposed by a single customer in the 30-day period, will be charged at the commercial rate for each fluorescent, and this policy will not be advertised. The last point being that we want to be able to control this potential abuse, but we don't need to tell everybody every last little detail so that they know how to game the system.
Commissioners, anybody have a comment on 6.1? Okay, we'll move on. 6.2, discuss possible action regarding, I'm sorry?
Was that a consensus approval of this policy or
Okay,
not?
let me ask this, because we're going through these things. Does public comment come after each subject? And I'll open that up and see if we want to do this individually, or I'm a little confused on how you want to handle this. Yes, go ahead.
After discussion on each individual item, such as 6.1, 6.2, but before voting, you should take public comment at that time.
Okay, all right, so let's open it up to the public. Is there public input on discussion, possible action regarding, discussion, possible action regarding, where are we? I'm missing, on the transfer station. Use of accepting residential fluorescent bulbs at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. Action? No, actually, there was no public comment. I closed that, so this is for our commissioners.
I think it's important to have this accountability and to avoid any possible abuses by businesses, although I know that most don't do that. There's always some. So we need to have some accountability here. So I would recommend that we adopt the new fluorescent tube policy.
So that's a motion?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Public comment again, we'll give that opportunity. None? Okay, let's call for the vote.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes?
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
And Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, that closes 5.1. Now we're into General Solid Waste Authority matters. 6.1 we have discussed. 6.2, discussion, possible action regarding mid-year review of the work priorities for Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority for calendar year 13-14. Ted?
Yeah, this covers fiscal year 13-14. It is mid-year review, and it's largely presented for the benefit of Mr. Gastineau and the new board member. It is a list of all of the things that we have to do and all of the discretionary activities that this board has directed that this agency pursue. So it's all listed there. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Compared to what I presented at the beginning of the fiscal year, this has not changed significantly. There are a few things that we've checked off the list, but mostly it's much the same.
We'll open it up to the commission first. The subjects, the titles are, we'll go through this, Del Norte County Transportation Facilities Operation, Crescent City Landfill Post-Closure Maintenance, Collections Franchises and Collection System Management, Reuse, Recycling, and Composting, Education and Public Outreach. Number 7 is Personnel and Staffing. Number 8 is Recovery, Infrastructure, and Recycling Market Development. Number 8 is Other Responsibilities, Activities. And then the Priority Discretionary Activities for 2013-14. This is not new, Ted. You have gone through this before, so there's nothing. I'm just reading off the subcategories. The Del Norte County Transfer Station Facilities Operation, Collection Franchises and Collection System Management. Number 3, Crescent City Landfill Post-Closure Maintenance. Number 4, Education and Outreach. Number 5, Legislation, Ordinances, Plans, and Enforcement. We know we're going to be discussing that on ordinances. So without going this, I'll come back to the board to see if they want to review. Is there something here that you wish to address, commissioners?
Again, what we had decided upon last time was that because of the former director leaving, was that Ted would concentrate on the mandatory and obligatory and not on any of the discretionary activities at this point in time because of changing hats and having a few extra duties, and also I noted on here, I went and compared them to what we had decided on before, and what's been completed is at the bottom of page 2, the checkoff mark about submitting the landfill gas report, which is done, and then at the top of the next page, applying for the reduction of the post-closure. So those are a couple of things that weren't completed last time we saw this list. And those are very important things, so I think we had the priority in the right place there.
All right, am I hearing you, Commissioner Wilson, saying that you would like the authority to direct Director Ward's emphasis away from priority discretionary activities for 2013 and 14? Is that what I'm hearing that you're suggesting?
We had just given direction. In fact, it was Commissioner Sullivan at the last time we went over this, that because of the shortage in staff, that he prioritize on the mandated and you know, the responsibilities. So,
All right, is there a consensus from our board to continue that?
Yes, for the most part. What I'm missing, though, and maybe I'm just missing it and it's here, is there was going to be continued discussion regarding the insurance, the landfill insurance.
Yeah, I heard that.
Is that in here?
It is
addressed it in
there.
the acting
In
director's
fact,
report.
under the priority discretionary activities for 13-14, the ones that I still have, my understanding is that I have direction to continue to pursue are little fingers pointing at them. So, for instance, analyzing, expanding, developing, supporting one or more facilities for processing locally generated organics materials is somewhere on the list. Certainly installing, documenting, and collecting water samples from the 2 new wells, which I just discussed, needs to continue to be on the list if you want that to come to completion.
Yes.
Procuring landfill insurance is
I see that
also
now. Thank you. I
has
just
a little
missed
finger
it.
on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so having seen that, I noticed the fingers there pointing that way. So does this authority want to change in the emphasis, or does it want to stay in the direction we have in directing our director to pursue on priority discretion activities all items with the asterisk star finger pointing toward it? Is that what I'm hearing? And we can do this by consensus. I don't think we need a vote. Is everybody on board with that? Okay, so then you have authority consensus that to continue in that area. Okay, so that's 6.2. 6.3, information and presentation from R3 Consulting Group. Okay, gentlemen, we're going to get a chance to meet you today, right? Okay, regarding work on the assessment of the Del Norte Solid Waste Authority, I wonder if we could have you come up to the dais and just so we can, or Ted, do you have PowerPoint?
I do.
Because I've heard a lot about these folks. I haven't met them. I haven't heard their names. And
I will be really brief, but I want to give an overview because the scope of work changed at the last meeting.
Okay.
Before we started this program off, I just wanted to show everybody once again the questions these consultants have been hired to answer.
Okay.
So without reading them one by one, I will just review the topic areas. So they're looking at staffing. They're looking at operations. They're looking at the director position. They're looking at the organizational structure. Include.
Can I?
Yes.
On this one here for the organizational structure, looks like it was it's slightly different. I just wanted to clarify in here, under, this was item B, it said that, is the JPA the most effective and efficient entity for managing solid waste in Del Norte County? And if not, what alternatives? And again, there was a little conversation between the board. We just didn't want it to make it seem as if it was, keep as is or privatize. Those were the only options. And so there was a discussion that, there's the alternatives might be some combination of, keeping the authority and, possibly privatizing part or making a combination. It didn't have to be all or one, because it's kind of sounded to me at the time when we went through that it was a all or nothing. And so just wanted to say this publicly that, that as far as the alternatives and scenarios that are put forward, that they don't have to be one or the other. They might come up with something we haven't thought about. There might be some scenarios or alternatives that are a combination of possible partial privatization and keeping the authority. And so, anyway, I just want to clarify that publicly, that was the question I had asked at the time, these questions, that these were presented and under B, which this doesn't have a B on it, the one I'm seeing in front of me, it's, we discussed that would be covered. Remember that?
Yes, I do, and that's part of what we're here today, and I think in looking over this budget, more than 25% of it is devoted to that one subject alone of the budget we've allocated in this one area. So when you consider the amount of money that we're spending, 1 out of every $4 is going to questions relating to and about the JPA and its effectiveness, and so I would expect that would be a good portion of the report. It wouldn't be left with a lot of unanswered questions with the kind of budget that I see allocated by R3. But perhaps you can explain that when you folks come up. Are there any other comments from commissioners on the scope of the study?
Got just a couple more slides.
Oh, do you have some more slides? Go ahead.
So there's also, they're looking at potential alternatives to the JPA. And so I'll let them introduce themselves, looking at the project milestones, but immediately following this will be a discussion about whether or not we will be having a public meeting on 28th of January. So.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Okay, hello.
My name is William Schoen. I'm a principal with R3. I guess I've had a chance to, or we've had the chance to speak with most of you at this point. We'll be speaking with you, Commissioner Gatlin, tomorrow morning.
Right.
Let me just briefly introduce the project team. My background is, I'm an engineer. I have a background in operations. I managed recycling operations in a landfill, so I've dealt with a lot of regulatory compliance and understand the issues dealing with regulatory agencies, those type of things. Our firm as a whole, we just work for municipal agencies. We do a lot of this type of work, coming in and assisting jurisdictions, both that operate facilities with improving those operations, reviewing those operations, management reviews, as well as those that contract with the private sector, looking at that relationship and how to improve both the operations of the private sector, but also the administration of those contracts. And you fall under both of those ends. Since you have a facility, you're responsible for the closed landfill, as well as overseeing the contracts. So that's two of the major components that we deal with as a firm. So we're very comfortable looking at that. The other two primary people that will be working on this project, Sam Chandler. Sam has a wide range of background in the solid waste industry, in operations of municipal systems. Among his positions, he operated the City of Tucson's solid waste collection system, so he's extremely familiar with collection operations. Most recently, he served as the Executive Director of the Merced County Joint Powers Authority. So Sam has dealt with all of the type of issues that JPAs deal with. Obviously, each JPA, each organization is different, but he has a very strong background in terms of the type of structure that the JPA is and the issues and concerns, many of which you've asked us to address as part of this project. In addition to Sam, Colin Wallace is also going to be working on this project. When we originally proposed, Colin worked for us a number of years ago, left the firm to do some things on his own. We hired him back just recently after we submitted this proposal, so we didn't originally intend or know that Colin would be available, so he's sort of a value added for this. We brought him on this, and Colin has served most recently as a special employee to R3, so he's still working with us, for a client of ours, a municipal agency, and much of what he's been doing for them is the regulatory compliance. So he's very familiar with the regulatory compliance aspects of that municipal agencies deal with. So I think he brings a lot to this project as well. So that's in a nutshell, sort of our firm, what we focus on, the project team. We're very excited to be part of this. We understand that it's a critical issue that you've been dealing with for a long time, so it's our objective to get you to the point where you can make a decision on this and move forward on to other things. And we're excited to do that and feel confident we'll be able to provide you with that information. We've had 2 days on site. We've met with quite a few people. We've got a lot of information, a lot of good input, and that's going to, I think, serve us well. And once we do the public meeting, I think with that information, we'll have, I think, a very good base to bring to you recommendations and the basis for that recommendations that will let you move forward in a positive manner. And we'd be happy to answer any questions if you have, but otherwise, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schoen. Commissioners, do you have questions of the R3 team at this time?
I don't think so at this time. I enjoyed meeting with you yesterday and look forward to
Yeah, we had a lot of questions for them, so you had an opportunity.
And we're glad to have you here, and we're going to help us get through this and come to it's been an issue that's been at the public's tail for a long time, so we're hoping we can find some closure on this, and one which puts some smiles on people's face and saves some money at the same time. So having said that, we thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. And I'll open up any public comments at this time regarding R3, if there are any. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to our board, and we'll close that, and we'll see you tomorrow morning on that. Thank you very much, Mr. Schoen. This would be 6.4, discussion possible action regarding setting a date for a special public meeting associated with the assessment of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority, and that date would be possibly January 28, 2014, here in this building at 5:30 in our supervisor chambers, the Board of Supervisors chambers. So I'll open that up for discussion to our commissioners at that time. If you can look at your calendars, does that look like a date that will work for our authority? Everybody okay with that date?
I won't be able to.
All right. Ted, do we have an alternate date? Because I would like to have as much participation. That would be a 100% participation. So do we have an alternate date? And
I
we can
believe the
include
day before and the
Commissioner
day
Wilson.
after were available, but we should check with Tony. But there
So
wasn't a lot of
The
flexibility.
27th or the 29th. Does that work with you, Mary?
Excuse me, I am available on the 28th. I looked at my calendar.
Oh.
Okay. So we're good on the 28th.
Oh,
All right.
all right.
An issue like this, I'd like to do as best we can. I realize exigent circumstances take place, and people can't be there for unknown reasons, but this is kind of an issue where as best we can, we'd like to get 100% participation from our authority. So hearing that, I will, the action on this is affirming this, so I will ask for a motion to see if the January 28th date at 5:30 here in this chamber is the correct date, so I'll ask for a motion on that.
Okay,
Go ahead.
you lost your button.
Yeah, this is my button. It goes on. It keeps falling off, as if I don't have enough other challenges. I would move that we have a special meeting on January 28th as a public meeting to allow R3 an opportunity to pursue the tasks that are before them. I don't know how else.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it is made motion by Commissioner Holly, seconded by Commissioner Wilson. Any public discussion from the public on this? All right, hearing none, I'll ask for the vote.
Commissioner Sullivan? Yes. Commissioner Wilson?
Yes?
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, we'll see the public meeting January 28th at 5:30 here. 6.5, discussion possible action regarding Authority Resolution 2014-01, adopting bylaws changing the regular monthly meeting date and time of our Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority to 3 o'clock, or different time if we so choose, rather than this unusual hour of 3:15, which would stay and remain the second Wednesday of each month. I'll open it up to the authority. Second?
Second.
It is moved and approved and seconded. So any discussion on this time-wise?
Well, I have to pick my kids up at 3. I was wondering if 3:30 would work for everybody.
Okay.
Is
So,
that okay? Or? I could make arrangements if I needed to, but if it's a,
Well, let me say that this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, and I appreciate it being on the agenda. It just seems like for the public, a 3:15 start time is a bit confusing, because everything else seems to start usually at the top of the hour. So I don't know if maybe even 4 o'clock would be a time that would be, and some of you, continue to work, and it may be a little bit easier to have 1 hour less during your workday.
well, let me ask you this, Mary, if I may, while we have your motion here. Would 3:30 work for you? Or do you need it later than that?
yeah, 3:30 would be fine.
Okay.
And most times 3, I have someone to help out, but
Well,
3:30 would be better for me.
3:30.
just
Then
in case.
then I will ask you, Commissioner Holly, would you amend your motion to 3:30 rather than 3 o'clock?
Oh, I don't believe I made the motion, but...
Oh, I thought, who was it? Okay, I didn't hear it came. Okay, I didn't hear who's came. So Commissioner Sullivan, will you amend it to 3:30? Yep. And second on that?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay.
In discussion?
Discussion?
I still think it's better to start at the top of the hour. I think the 4 o'clock start time might be better than 3:30.
Okay.
I didn't invent anything.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Sullivan, would you,
Yeah, I'd like to make a
Mary, is
substitute
4
motion.
o'clock okay for you? Or
Yeah, 4 o'clock's fine.
means you could get done by 6 or so?
well, I think, Ted, if I'm not mistaken, we need a, we need a 2-hour window.
I think it's reasonable that the board should continue to expect meetings would typically last a little, 2 hours or a little more depending. But, so please, if you could not, the meeting does move to 4 o'clock, try not to schedule something for 5, try to wait until 6:15 for your other appointments.
All right, we have a motion on the floor and seconded for 3:30. So unless someone wants to change that motion to make it 4 o'clock, or otherwise, I will then ask for the vote on that, and if it fails, then we'll go for 4. So having said that, can we call for the vote at 3:30? Is there anybody with a problem with 3:30? I don't have a problem with the 3:30. I'm trying to see if everybody would like to do this at the same time. So,
I'll call the question.
okay, let's call for the vote. At 3:30 it is.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes?
Mr. Sullivan? Yes. Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
And Chairman Gitlin?
And would be yes, 3:30 it is, new time, and that will be effective. And while I have everyone here, the date for the next meeting falls on a public holiday. It is Lincoln's birthday, February 12th, and that meeting will in fact be the day earlier, and it will be at 3:30 here in this chamber following a Board of Supervisors meeting. I hope we don't run late on that. So having said that, that will be the date, February 11th, for the next meeting at 3:30. Okay, moving right along, 6.6, information regarding policies and programs to address illegal dumping. Go ahead, Director Ward.
I was asked to summarize some of the programs that we have to address illegal dumping, and it's entirely appropriate that the board understand what tools that we have, because we do have several. And so on the back side of the staff report, you see a summary including, on the collection side, we have street side trash and recycling containers, and we have community recycling bins. So these are available 24 hours, 7, and they're available to whoever wants to put the materials in there. Of course, the street side containers are designed to be of benefit to tourists and other visitors and self-haulers who might want to recycle a can or two. They're not meant for people to put their apartment's trash in. Also on the collections, we have bulky item collections. Residential customers subscribing to trash collections are eligible for up to 2 free bulky items collected annually: mattresses, box springs, TVs, appliances, tires, furniture, and a box of household electronics each count as 1 bulky item. Refrigerators or freezers count as 2 because of the extra cost for Freon removal. We also have prepaid bags available through Recology. Recology Del Norte sells these bags for $7.40 each, and they may be placed on the curb on collection day, even if that household does not subscribe to regular collection services. So this service is generally appealing to those who have very little trash or do not need weekly collections. And then it's also a low-cost way for folks who have a trash can that occasionally, during certain times, they have more materials to dispose than they have space in their trash can, so then they can use a prepaid bag for the overflow. Also on the collection side, as we discussed before, we have 20 authority-directed community bin pulls, and so those are also used for community cleanup activities. At the authority facilities, we also have free items that we take. So at the Del Norte County Transfer Station, we take the following for no charge: televisions and computer monitors, used motor oil, oil filters, used antifreeze, car batteries, all household batteries, non-aerosol latex paints, cooking fats, oils and greases, home-generated sharps, holiday trees currently, all architectural coatings starting later this month, though January 14th is not the right date, and household fluorescent tubes. We also encourage people to tarp their loads. So the authority staff provides flyers to customers about the need to tarp their loads, and occasionally we do work with the California Highway Patrol and the County Code Enforcement Officer to enforce against untarped loads. We also have ordinances that are mandatory responsibility ordinance, and we will talk about that further next month, I believe. But essentially in 2008, the Solid Waste Authority adopted several ordinances to reduce illegal dumping and blight, to encourage and enforce proper disposal, and to increase recycling and resource recovery. And under these policies, all landowners are responsible for providing solid waste and recycling collections from their properties, and fines can be assessed for noncompliance. So these are all different tools that we have to address concerns about illegal dumping and blight. Now, I've also included in this report additional alternative strategies that the board at various times might consider or has considered. I'm not recommending that we pursue any of these, but I think it's worthwhile that the board understand what your menu of options are. You could expand the budget for community cleanup. You actually discussed this very issue, and that maybe we might want to do that in the coming fiscal year. The authority could hire its own code enforcement officer. I think there's a number of reasons why that's not necessarily a good idea, but not the least of which is I think our current relationship with the county code enforcement officer works quite well. Contrary to earlier testimony today, we actually do use these ordinances, and they are our primary tool when people call about concerns about illegal dumping, because the response is we find out where the dumping has occurred, and if it's an area that's appropriate for the code enforcement officer to pursue, then I file a complaint under the forms that we've established, and he pursues it. And then we help pay for the code enforcement costs for that activity. We could distribute bags or vouchers to help clean up particular target areas. It's an ongoing suggestion that does come up. People will say, well, what you ought to do is you ought to have a free day. And I do not recommend doing this. And probably the main reason for that is if you start establishing an event where it's free, some people will start storing up and waiting for that event. And so even if you only do it once, they will act like you're going to be doing it every year, and you may have taken an action that for that particular type of individual has increased blight rather than reduced it. We also have the possibility of mandatory collection. This was considered as we were developing the collection service standards, and this is the idea that if you're in a certain area, you have to sign up for garbage service. You no longer have the option for self-hauling. At the time, the board decided that that was not an attractive policy to pursue because there are a large fraction of people who are self-haulers, and they really enjoy being able to haul their own trash when they need to do so. There is the possibility of an ordinance requiring proof of disposal. I think that's probably from a regulatory standpoint, a little more heavy-handed than we want to go. And then there's the possibility of offering rewards for information leading to the arrest and conviction of illegal dumpers. That might be a relatively low cost for the benefit, but it's not something that we've pursued thus far. So that's an overview of our policies for illegal dumping and other additional policies you might consider.
Commissioners, comments?
Yeah, I wanted to add one potential policy. I brought it up before. Basically, I've noticed in other areas what they've done is for landowners who have been illegally dumped upon, they get one free time where they can bring in the someone else's trash that's ended up on their property for free, just one time. And I noticed they're using that in several different counties, and so they said it's been a success. So that would be a strategy or program that might be looked at in the future in a little bit more detail. So if I could add that one to the list, please.
Do you have a contact or the county?
I do. I got the information off the internet, so I'm not going to tell you the name right now,
Okay.
but I do
We
have
can
that.
follow up on
and-
that.
Yeah, so that would be, again, just a one-time thing that they do for people. I'm pretty sure Lake County right now, and there's one other that I saw, so. Because sometimes they're the landowner is the victim, and they've got to pay to take someone else's trash. And then after the first time, they could gate it or do whatever they need to.
And let me affirm that we do receive those kinds of complaints probably about 3 or 4 times a year.
Other commissioners, any feedback for Director Ward on this?
I think, Ted, only that I appreciate the spreadsheet you provided us. That'll give us an opportunity to respond to those that see those kinds of things on the road that all of us see and we found so objectionable.
And let me just reiterate, to the extent that any commissioner notices any solid waste related blight, feel free to give our office a call and we'll deal with it as best we can using the tools that we have available.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other comments? I'd like to make one comment. We'll be taking this issue up on our Board of Supervisors on an area that has been severely blighted over many years, which is that Union Street issue. And we'll be talking about how we can secure that property and at what cost. So the board will be studying this. Dumping and blight's a big problem in the beautiful Del Norte County. And it's not a one-size-fits-all problem how to fix it. I think more education is certainly important, and warning people, admonishing people that they're doing this will come at great cost to them. And also the reality is that in education points, and this has been come across to my attention, people are not often aware they can remove large items or carpet items or something like that, so they hire someone unscrupulous. They'll say, can you get rid of this for me? Thinking that they'll never see it again, and then it ends up at the end of Skateboard Hill in the city, over a hill, some carpet that's been dumped there, and it's annoying, it's unsightly. In one of the most beautiful areas, we see people dumping, and it's something that we have to address, and we have to do it aggressively. So do we have any public comment on this issue of information and policy regarding illegal dumping in our county? Anybody from the public wish to address? Okay, so I'll close this up. This is no action on this, and we'll move on to any other board comments. We'll move on. 6.7, discussion possible action regarding working with the Mural Society and other community groups, organizations, and schools to develop one or more murals in a recycling theme. And again, let me cloak this in the discussion. We also have a graffiti problem in our community. It seems to have exploded. And we were thinking and brainstorming that possibly covering the areas with murals would discourage those taggers from doing that. So Ted, I'll refer that to you at this point for additional information.
I briefly touched upon this in my director's report for last month, and so I was asked to put it on the agenda for this month. And basically we're looking for consensus direction from the board that this is something that you would like us to pursue. As part of our grants from the Department of Conservation Division of Recycling, we do have money available to promote recycling, and we do that primarily through radio and television ads and other outreach. But I think working with Mural Society or other organizations as directed by this board to develop a recycling-themed mural in a strategic location, I think could address certainly outreach and awareness regarding recycling opportunities, but also potentially removing an area that might be a target for graffiti. So if the board would like me to pursue this, I can put this on the list. If not, then we can continue the regular outreach we've been doing using radio and television.
And if I just may say, other than just the Mural Society, there are some talented people in our community. I refer to Harley Munger as one of those. So we're talking about this in more of general terms of those people who have talents can help, and we get assistance from the schools and or mural societies, including members of the community, to deal with even smaller areas like utility boxes that are so often tagged up and what have you. So I'll ask the board, if the authority, if they wish to have our director, Mr. Ward, pursue these avenues.
What's your timeline?
Well, it really depends on the partners, and since I haven't had the first meeting with anyone else, I don't know. Kind of depends on how much it takes to develop a design, develop a location, and make it happen. In terms of the resources we have to contribute, those are available immediately. But in terms of having a successful community design process, something that people are happy with and proud of, which of course is the standard that we would intend to meet, then that might take a little bit longer, and it should. But I don't know at this point.
So your time, how much free time do you have?
Oh, how much free time do I have?
Yeah.
Well,
In order to
my
devote
intent
to
on
it.
this would be to do a series of meetings that take a limited amount of time. As I would start off on this, I would probably engage Lori Poole from Recology and possibly Jordan Kekry as the recycler in the community, and look at where we might be able to do this. And then I'd also want to confer with the folks who were involved with the graffiti task force about trying to identify where would be the best location for such a mural. Once we have the location and the dimensions, then we can start working on the design process, which then opens up the question of how do we want to go about doing that? Do we want to engage the schools in that, or do we want to have the Mural Society and some of their artists do it, or if we're working with someone like Harley Munger, are we talking about a ceramics project? So it really could go in a number of directions, and I'd want to have the first few meetings and then come back to the board for additional guidance.
Authority, members, commissioners?
Sounds like a lot of time. Is someone else go point on that, or do you have?
I have a very good working relationship with Lori Poole, and I don't know at this point how much time it would take, but as I would see it as a series of meetings, I think meeting by meeting it wouldn't necessarily take that much time, and I wouldn't anticipate that I would be the one designing the mural, and that would probably take most of the time. I don't think I would either be designing or painting, so.
How does the authority feel about agendizing this for February and inviting some of these interested parties to attend our meeting and have a discussion on this at the February 11th meeting? Does the board have
I
an
think
input
it's
on
a
that?
good idea. I don't have any problem with it. My concern is the time that the director, Ted, has in order to help out with this. Often some of these, I don't know if you want to call it, getting volunteers together, it can be very, very time consuming, and it's another job. And, you know, if you want to have it turn out nicely, and I don't know how full your plate is. That's been our concern here is, you know, you're taking on quite a bit. We have our consultants here at this point in time, and I don't know, you know, if this might be the best time to move ahead with that, or if maybe down the road. I don't know. That's why I'm asking you these questions to try and get an idea, because, you know, you have a lot on your plate.
I really appreciate that, and oftentimes with these things, my view is moving with the momentum and the opportunity as they arise is oftentimes a good way to go. And so because there was discussion about graffiti and possibly interest in murals, it seemed to be a good fit, and that was so if this is something to be pursued, perhaps this is the moment. Regarding making the time, things shuffle. I do the best I can with the days that I have, but I I have not engaged in this process before, so I don't actually know how much time it will take.
Maybe we could give Ted an opportunity to do some initial inquiries that don't take very much time, and you'll get a better sense of it and just report back to us. And then we can kind of go from there. I don't
So
know.
you're saying not to have this as part of the director's report next month? Make an inquiry?
Yeah, I think that
make
would
some
be a little
inquiries.
premature. I think that just have some inquiries, see if any momentum it starts to exist elsewhere.
I think that's really key, because I agree with Commissioner Wilson. If I'm the one pushing this all alone, it's probably not going to happen and probably shouldn't be a priority. If there are interested parties that are interested in, they're ready to do a mural, they're just looking for a place in the design, I think we can make that happen.
Well, Ted, I'm guessing you're going to be pretty busy this next 6 to 8 weeks with R3 here in town, so I'm thinking maybe the timing on this to devote time to this might not be in the best interest. So I'll defer to the authority unless you have a motion you wish to introduce and direct Ted to do a certain task in this. You want to make an initial inquiry, get back to us in your director's report. I think maybe the focus should be on R3 right now. Anybody?
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we'll move on from that. 6.8, information regarding the formation, responsibilities, history of Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority with respect to setting and controls for maximum rates to be charged for discard collection services, solid waste and recycling services, and securing disposal capacity as required under Public Resource Code sections 41701 and 41703. Ted?
Yeah. So this is the fourth in a series of ongoing informational items about the purpose of the authority and how we execute those purposes. So we've already talked about facility planning, development, permitting, and gate attendance. We've talked about recycling and household hazardous waste programs, as well as outreach. We've talked about managing the collections franchise and service standards. Now we're going to talk about setting and controlling rates. These are all purposes that are outlined in our joint powers agreement that formed this agency and was approved by the entire City Council and the entire Board of Supervisors. So as we look at rate policies and issues, this is really the foundation of public oversight. We're a public agency. These are public rates that are set by this board and approved by this board through a public process. Unlike, say, when you go to a grocery store, there's no public process deciding how much the can of corn is. So based on the service fees procured under competitive public processes to meet the service standards set on by the authority. What that all means is that the service standards are, what are the services we offer? How are things collected? What materials are collected? What kind of containers? On what days of the week? How can you operate this thing? Similarly, what materials are separated? How much are each of those paid to Hambro Waste Solutions Group to process? What are the requirements for storing and processing those? We have the service fees. Each of these service fees are split into components to control future cost increases. So for instance, for the collections franchise agreement, we have, each rate is broken down into a percentage of collection, transport, and tipping. So when the disposal rates go up at the transfer station, that does affect the collection rates, but it's only a fraction of the total rate. Obviously, when the disposal rate at the transfer station goes up, it has nothing to do with the cost to collect or transport those materials. Those are unaffected. Therefore, it's only appropriate that that rate increase only affect a portion of the rates. That's what it means to break up each of these rates into components, because that way as things change, we can say, well, that doesn't affect the whole rate, it only affects part of it. This is also important in the event of, say, major changes to gas prices, major changes to insurance, or other things that affect any of those components. We create, the rates in themselves create incentives to reward separation for recovery. So at the transfer station, I've handed each of you the sheet with the pink list on it, right? And those are all of the rates at our transfer station. On the back side, you'll see all of the rates for Recology, Del Norte, and on the third page, you'll see the rates that are charged at the Gasky and Klamath container site transfer stations. But as you can see there, for instance, we have a lower rate for separated carpet that's properly prepared. We have a lower rate for brush. We have a lower rate for metals that are separated. And so the more one separates for recovery when you come to the transfer station, the lower your overall cost. And this is not only, of course, a way to incentivize good customer behavior, but it's also a way to do outreach, because our experience has been that no matter how many brochures we put out there, there's some people who still have not gotten the idea that we take televisions for no charge. If you see a television dumped by the side of the road, clearly that person did not get the message that if they just brought it to the transfer station, it would be free. So we want to create rates that communicate themselves, because somebody will say, hey, I just went to the transfer station, I unloaded brush, it cost me 47 cents. They'll start telling people, and other people start adopting those behaviors.
But don't mix the brush with the carpet.
But the people who mix the brush with the carpet will pay the full solid waste rate, and they're customers too. So if people don't want to separate their recyclables, they just want to go to some place and have the joy of purging, they're a customer too, and they're welcome.
Well, we've been in that, as a customer of your service, I've done that in my truck, and I've brought in things, and I've gone around a couple of times. So that, having been said, help comes from the counter. If you want to go around and do it twice, here's the wood and measure, so that works. And I think we just have to keep hammering away at people and let them know they can save money and not to end up on, Low Divide Road or something.
Both the rates for the collections franchise and Hambros, in their contracts, they have annual fee adjustments. Those are made by change orders, because any change to the contract is done through a change order. And those cost increases are limited by the Consumer Price Index. So essentially, the Consumer Price Index is a national standard way of measuring how much costs have increased, and it's a way of acknowledging that if costs increase for everybody, there should be a way to continue these agreements so that they're not losing money because of inflation, but also our rates are not going up out of pace for inflation. So that's one way of keeping those cost controls in place. Rates also raise funds to meet the other authority commitments, such as landfill compliance, household hazardous waste programs, permanent fees, etc. This is how we raise those fees. And in your agreement, in the board packet, you'll see under Exhibit G, I did attach some of the liquidated damages that are available as enforcement tools if needed in the future. I want to be really clear, we have not assessed any of these liquidated damages, but the idea is that there may be a time in future when the authority board wants to make sure that this agreement is followed more closely to the letter, and the liquidated damages are a way to make sure that that happens quickly. Again, it's not an enforcement tool that we've used, it's simply available. New rates for new services, such as when there's a new contract for transfer station operations or a new collections franchise, those new rates are adopted by ordinance. Or if there's a new service that previously didn't exist that we want to charge for, those also would be adopted by an ordinance and following the public notice requirements, et cetera, that apply to ordinances. However, once those new rates are adopted, those rates can be updated by resolution. So the standard thing when we have a consumer price index adjustment, which we do every year, is we'll adopt the change orders through this board, and then those are implemented by adoption of a resolution to implement those rates. And this board can be proud in that the Del Norte County Transfer Station has the lowest rates, lower rates than any facility in Humboldt or Curry counties. And once again, there are the numbers demonstrating that fact. And we regularly do have customers coming in from Curry County on a regular basis, less so from Humboldt because it's a longer drive, but we do regularly consider them part of our customer base. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Oh, there is one other thing I want to cover in that bit at the end there, what it says, including securing disposal capacity for Delaware County residents, agencies, and businesses as required under Public Resources Code, et cetera. Essentially what this board is required to do as part of planning for the future is we need to secure 15 years of disposal capacity for this community moving forward. And that's a rolling requirement. So we need 15 years this year, next year we need 15 years, next year we need 15 years. So at this point, we have approximately 16 or 17 years. So we're getting on the point where we probably will need to look at this. But it is accomplished at this point by, we're a third-party beneficiary to an agreement between Hambro and the Dry Creek landfill, which is administered by Rogue Valley Disposal. So they have their disposal agreement, and that secures our disposal capacity, and it automatically rolls over. So essentially, under that agreement, we have secured disposal capacity through the 13th of March 2030. So we're good for now. But that's part of our responsibilities. Part of the responsibilities is this agency as defined in the Joint Powers Agreement that structures us.
And didn't White City, did they recently get an extension on their capacity, the amount of time that they are going to be able to continue taking in material? So again, I personally believe that relationship with White City is just vital to Del Norte County, and it's very important. How is it? How's things going with you guys? You guys have a good relationship with those guys?
You know, and I'm seeing Wes in the audience here, and of course, Wes, love you to come up here so all our records are on, our comments, which are valuable, are on record. But I don't think it's a bad idea if any of us commissioners take a little drive to White City and take a look at the operation, dry landfill.
I'm thinking I should go over with one of those, the trucks that go over. Would I be allowed to go there?
Sure, absolutely.
I
Any of the
mean,
commissioners are always allowed over there, you bet.
Yeah.
Happy to field a field trip. or
Well,
something.
I actually should say I drove through it the other day. We're coming back from Nevada, and that was an interesting ride coming across 140. But I'd like to see it, so I think I'm going to put that on my agenda,
Yeah.
and I'll be in touch with you on that.
Be happy to make arrangements and take you over. Or if you'd rather ride in one of our garbage trucks, we'd be happy to take you over that way too. So. Mike, what do you think?
Go through that canyon, I hear is pretty interesting
go.
in one of those big trucks, so,
And
live
just
on
for the
edge.
record, since we have you in front and we're on television, you are, identify yourself.
Wes White, CEO with Hambro WSJ.
Okay.
All right.
And a good partner in our community in helping us get rid of our solid waste, so thank you, Wes.
Thank
Well,
you.
that's a good report on White City too, so.
Yeah. Are there any other comments from commissioners or questions regarding Ted's report on 6.8 and the, I guess with respect to setting and controlling the rate structure in which we have, do we have any other comments or questions from authority members?
I have some questions, but I'll ask those personally.
Okay.
Just because the detail of it's a little bit hard to go into.
Thank you for the history.
All right, and I'll open that up to the public also. Ruth, okay?
Elizabeth Henry again from the county. This popped in my mind with a couple of the agenda items, and when I looked at securing disposal capacity, it popped into my mind again. I was really discouraged and unhappy when you all turned down the opportunity to do
Now, Elizabeth, we're talking about 6.8 right now?
Yes.
Okay, good, I
Yeah, I'm
wasn't sure.
talking about securing disposal, being
Okay.
sure that you have
Sorry to interrupt, go right ahead.
to dispose of what you collect, and you had an opportunity to work with the state. What's the agency name? I'm not sure.
Cal Recycle.
Cal Recycle, to study your waste stream. They wanted to have a study on rural waste streams, which I thought would be very helpful, so you know what's coming in and what you need to do with it. Is there more potential for recycling? you know, how can you plan if you don't know what's coming in? I'm sure, you know, the collectors maybe have more of an idea, but I think it would be essential. And if it's not too late to get involved in something like this, I
Okay.
just think it would be so valuable to the authority and to all the county and city residents, so for future planning. So,
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Any other public comments? I see none. I'll bring it back to the commission. Any additional comments? Okay, we'll move on to the last item, 6.9, information regarding AB 1234, ethics training requirements. Ted?
I'll let Martha Rice summarize this one.
Okay.
This is just a reminder that as public officials, you're required to, every 2 years, take 2 hours of ethics training. This began in 2005. I think maybe this is mostly for the benefit of Mary, since city and county commissioners should already be getting this instruction through their other bodies. It is very easy to do. The link in here that's in this memo takes you right to the website. Takes a little bit of time, but it's, you know, a fairly simple, gives you the explanation and then has you answer the question. So it's just a little bit of practice to let you identify when there's a potential issue regarding, it could be potential conflict of interest, or it could have to do with spending money or receiving gifts and all that different kind of stuff. So
I'll take
recommend that you
class.
take a look at it.
Yeah, it looks pretty easy. I looked at it. It's 2 hours. I was assuming there was a class I needed to go to or be sent to. But if it's online, that looks really easy. I can get that done by next meeting. I'll make a commitment.
It is, and it's helpful. You know, it's just it's kind of, I think it's intended to be more like a refresher. And so you're supposed to do that every 2 years, and if you could print out your certificate and turn it into the acting director, that would also be helpful. They are public records, so if somebody comes and asks for them and they're not there, then assume maybe they're done.
Thank you, Martha. Are there any other comments? And again, I took mine online. I have my certificates with the county. Is that something that's accessible to you? Do I have to go get that certificate and get it to you?
Now that you've told me, I can check with
Yeah.
the county and try to get
Right.
it from them.
Okay.
You too?
Right.
City members also? Okay, so I'll check with the city also.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so that concludes all the agenda items. Unless there are any other further comments, I will adjourn the meeting, and we will meet again February 11th at 3:30 at the new corrected time here at the Flynn Center. We are adjourned.